Hi, welcome to the Evolving Leadership and Workplace Culture Summit.
We're bringing you 10 quality recordings on topics like diversity, culture, team building, social responsibility, mindfulness, and more. Our speakers also come from a wide variety of backgrounds. It is important to us that you hear from somebody you've never met.
The platform we're using, Hey Summit, is pretty intuitive. Just click on the schedule at the top of the page to see when topics are airing. The sessions are not an hour long, so you'll have time for breaks and getting stuff done in between the sessions.
And we'll also be on Twitter taking your questions and comments about each of the sessions. Use the hashtag #LeadCulture to join the conversation. So let's introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Tracy Stuckrath, president of Thrive Meetings and Events. I'm a dietary needs expert, I'm a meetings industry changemaker, and I'm a certified meetings manager. I have a passion for safe and inclusive food and beverage, which drives me to help clients establish best practices, reduce risk, improve experiences, and increase their profits with the food and beverage that they serve. My context is that every meal matters and every guest counts.
That's awesome. And I'm Elizabeth. I am currently building a company that humans want to work for and buy from. And here's why. Many of us are frustrated by work because we want it to feel more fulfilling. I spent about a decade geeking out about all the exciting new technologies, but ultimately realized that technology is just a tool. It might help you get the job done, but really what you need more than the technology is to design an experience. Then I spent the next 5 years connecting my stakeholders' wants and needs with the business goals and objectives. So I have a very particular viewpoint on experience design. I'm using my many years of experience in customer service and hospitality and adding in the concepts of human-centered design and service delivery. We all have more examples of bad management than we do of good leadership, but I want that to change, which is why Tracy and I have put together this virtual summit for you so that we can share our viewpoints and you can learn from a bunch of other amazing experts in this area.
So let's get right to it. Elizabeth, I'm going to interview you first.
All right.
All right. So we're in the middle of COVID-19. We're dealing with a lot of stuff. I've heard a lot about resilience, but you've written a lot about adaptability. And in another word, I call it pivoting. You know, a lot of us are pivoting. Can you explain the difference between those two things and how they can help us?
Yeah, I noticed there definitely are a lot of people. I think that, and yes, there's a lot of things right now that we can't control, right? And I know that, you know, that's really the core of where this is coming from. Like resilience is just get through it, right? You know, and so the difference in my mind between, you know, resilience and adaptability is resilience is, you know, just stay strong, right? Like these messages about we're in it together, right? Like, it's just kind of like, you know, keep going through the crap, right? Whereas adaptability was something I started writing about in January, really focusing on, you know, how companies can be sustainable 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And that was, you know, pre-COVID-19, right? Like that was pre-disruption of a lot of industries. Already, it seemed like the smartest people I knew were talking about being adaptable and what it meant for a company to be adaptable. How do you change quickly? You know, and this is the thing, having that mindset before, you know, I used to say all the time, like, disrupt yourself before you get disrupted. Well, now it's too late. Like, now it's too late for that, right? Like, no, like we didn't all disrupt ourselves. We just took for granted that what was in front of us, like the way people do business, the way everything operates, we just took for granted that that's the way it would always be. And, you know, for whatever reason, it's easy for me to, you know, I'm just the person that questions everything, right? Like, but, you know, what if it didn't work that way? Like, you know, what if we did things differently? So for me, I think, however it is that we get through this or, you know, turn and do something else, I think the thing to take with you long term is to keep that in your mind, that you need to figure out, you know, basically just don't take anything for granted, right? And figure out how you can be adaptable and change, you know, change yourself even when you think things are going well. Because that's the hardest part, right? Is you think everything's fine. right? Like, why would I change what is it, the wheel, like, like if it's not broke, like, don't fix it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, everyone loves that, loves that motto, but like, unfortunately, I think that you do need to break it regardless.
Well, and I think, in our current environment, you're seeing a lot of that happen. I mean, there are still a lot of people that are sitting still and waiting to figure out what's going on. But, there are companies that are doing some adaptation. I love, looking at the events industry aspect of it. Convention centers are turning into temporary hospital areas, right? And now I can't think of anything else off the top of my head of companies that are pivoting, or everybody that's making masks. I mean, that's a huge pivot. So how can you, and I think organizations have to do that internally, and let people below the top tier, pivot sometimes and see where they can go.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, right? Resilience is important, right? Like these kinds of skills, being resilient, being adaptable, are important for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So these adaptability and resilience seem like skills of an emotionally intelligent person, which is EQ, right? That's the short term for it. What have you learned about emotional intelligence in individuals, and how can that help organizations?
Yeah, I mean, the funny story, what's funny to me is I really thought that I had a high EQ.
Everybody has a high,
let's just laugh about that, like, for a second, right? Like, because I truly am fairly empathetic. I have this, I really have a strong intuition. I know I can sense what people are feeling, and I thought, like, I kind of thought that was the gist of it, right? Like, to me, that, like, you read the, EQ is like empathy and some other, like these other things, right? And I'd be like, yeah, like, I think I'm pretty solid. I'm squared away on, EQ, but I spent about 6 months of 2019 on a sabbatical, because I had lost my job, and I just knew I was in this place where I needed to refocus. Like, I need to figure out what is my purpose. Like, what am I? Yes, of course, it's like midlife crisis, a little dose of grief in there. Like, I had a lot of things, like different forms of grief, like a lot of existential crises, right, happening. Like, they all hit me at the same time, and it knocked me on my ass. So really, I just knew I needed a timeout and needed to figure out, what I should be doing. Well, so the funny part, getting back to, like, what's funny is, over that period of time, I learned a lot about myself. It's my personality, the kind of person I am. It's easy for me, and this is going to sound sad, but it's easy for me to see my strengths, but not be as aware of my weaknesses, right? Whereas for other people, they're very aware of their weaknesses, right? And they really kind of get bogged down, and, like, they don't have a lot of confidence because they're truly aware of what their weaknesses are, and they're not as aware of what their strengths are. And so just, for me, this process of learning more about myself, getting that awareness, learning more about, just emotions, like, literally just, emotions and mental health and how people think and how people feel, like, that was the piece I really needed to tap into, because I really operate from my gut. Like, my gut, is what drives me. And so I, really connecting with my feelings, right, was like the piece that I was missing. And so you'd think, to be an emotionally intelligent person, you should also be able to, tap into your own feelings as well. But one of the tools that I found that helped me the most is called the Enneagram. It's Enneagram. I know it's like a really weird word and hard to spell. So that was the thing that, of all the other personality profiles and ways to learn about yourself that are out there, that one, really helped me figure myself out and figure out what was going on, in my head. So I highly recommend that one for sure.
And we can put that in the information below this segment so people can do it themselves.
Yeah.
I might go look at it too. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard because, and right now a lot of people are probably questioning, who they are, because, you've been furloughed after working for a company for a long time, and figuring out, taking this time to figure that out and who you are and what you want to do, and then go back to that adaptability and pivoting, and how can you take what you know how to do and do it in a different environment or a different
Mm-hmm.
vertical market, right?
Well, yeah, and it could be anything, right? You can
Yeah,
be like, do the same thing you're doing, but do it somewhere else,
right,
right? It could be, do something, go do something totally different, but maybe in the same environment, or like, the same space, right? Like, so there's different
right.
ways of looking at that. I will also recommend the book, What Color is Your Parachute? That
Great
one's
book. Yeah.
that one's been around forever. And honestly, I read through that. It's not a book you just read, it's a book you have to do, right? It has all these
Right.
like all the worksheets, right? It's like
Right.
one of those books, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
so don't get into it unless you're committed to like figuring out what your purpose in life is. But if you do all those exercises and all the writing and ranking things, like, it tells you what kind of work, like your interest, like what are the things you're interested in, what kind of people do you want to work with, like in what environment do you want to work in, like even those questions right now, as people are, everybody's working at home, and there's a lot of conversation about like, hey, can we just extend this ability for people to work remotely, the ones that want to. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole nother, we could do a whole, I'm sure there are virtual summits just on that topic, right? Of like
Mm-hmm.
remote work. So yeah, it's the What Color is Your Parachute really guides you through all of the different pieces, that make up that puzzle, and then culminating with like, what is it that you're truly passionate about? Like, what is your purpose, to kind of tie it all together. So, I would recommend that one as well for people that might be open to the idea of doing
Right.
something different or doing something, in a new environment. But yeah, really the point, for leaders is that you have to know yourself before you can be a good leader. And I think there's this whole new area that that I'm fascinated with now around emotions and mental health, and
Mm-hmm.
how all of before, generations before ours, it was like, no, you walk in the door at work and you leave all of your other garbage behind, right? But that is not the
Right.
future. Like, that's not going to work in the future. That's not going to work for folks that are our age and younger, and a lot of and
Yeah.
a lot of people that are older, right? Like, we know that we expect more from work, and that includes belonging with whatever emotions that I have, and having your coworkers be able to hold that space for you to do that.
I have no idea why that just popped into my head, but that movie, The Intern, with Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro.
Love that movie.
I know, but it kind of brings that into play. I mean, because she was discounting him as this older person, but she was having trouble at her own home and
Yeah.
struggling with what she was doing, and she needed that to figure out herself
Yeah.
as well. And he,
Yeah.
the fact that he used to work in that building doing telephone books, I mean, that helped her realize what he could bring to her.
Yeah,
So
and just that he was what he had lived experience, right? He was
right,
wise enough to see that something was wrong, or like
right,
see what was really going on, and
right.
and that's honestly, like, that's what we need out of
Yeah,
work. We need those kinds of interactions, and some of our other speakers that we've got over the next 2 days, we'll dive deeper into some of those topics as well. So yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Okay, next question. You ready?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of research exists that proves diverse teams are more successful. And you and I worked together on Meeting Professionals International's Diversity and Inclusion Committee last year. Can you share some examples of where and how diverse teams work better? And then, and then how companies are potentially missing the boat?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll go with tackle the negative first. I think
Yeah.
it goes back to this idea that if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's just too easy to think like, oh, things are going well, like we're making money, this is fine. Obviously people are seeing the research out there that says that you'll be more profitable if you've got
Mm-hmm.
a diverse team. But yeah, I think that I acknowledge that it probably just feels like one more thing that you have to do, right? And you're already super busy. I am hoping that this pause, if it is a pause for you, right now. If you've, and Neil, one of our speakers, is talking about, HR departments hiring teams. If you've paused, freeze, or if you've frozen hiring right now, then you do have somewhat of a pause in like, okay, could we be, doing this? Could we be doing this differently?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that the companies that are doing it well are tying diversity, equity, and inclusion, one or all three, back to the metrics of how employees are, to their performance, right? Like, is there a goal that you can create for your teams around any of those three, right? Diversity, equity, or inclusion. Can you reward your staff for doing the right things beyond just, what they're making, or like the product or service that you're delivering? I think those are, those are some examples of companies that are doing it well. It's not just a poster on the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
That says like, oh, this, diversity, if diversity, even, equity or inclusion are even one of your values, right? Then it's like, it's like relegated to, a poster on the wall. So that's great. But, what does that actually do at the end of the day? Do you remember any good examples or case studies from the research that we were doing last year?
Not from that research, no, but I mean, it brings back to, just things that I've seen in different I'm in a group on the National Speakers Association on accessibility, and individuals who are hearing impaired or visually impaired, or, have to utilize a wheelchair. And it goes back to my old corporate job, and I have no idea why this keeps popping into my head about him, but there's a gentleman that utilizes a wheelchair, and the bathrooms in the lobby require to use a door, and you use a door, with the handle, and he's got to pull it in, and then you go into the little lobby, and then you have to use that door, another door, to get it. I'm like,
Right.
really
Right.
makes it so hard. And just another thing that opened my eyes is witnessing my friend who was at an event with us, and she utilizes a wheelchair as well. But to get to the event space where we were having lunch, she had to go down 2 back elevators and the back of the house of the hotel to get to that event space. And then when she got there, there was no attendant at the buffet to help her get her food from the buffet table. And then when she went to roll up to a table to sit to enjoy her lunch, every single table had 12 chairs around it, so there was no place for her to wheel up to. And she and another colleague in a wheelchair asked the hotel to remove some of the chairs, and they removed all of the chairs from the table. And so they were left to eat by themselves. And how I met them was like, hey, I don't know anybody here. Can I pull up a chair and have lunch with you? And that moment in my life, which was 4 years ago, it was like this big light bulb. And as an event planner, how do I look at diversity and inclusion differently? And, and looking at websites. So, I mean, it's harder. It's easier than you think it is if you start to pay attention, but sometimes that light bulb has to go off.
Yeah. And I love that you bring in the event example, because once I identified this, this area of, human-centered design and applying it to events and the employee experience, I realized, the way you set up an office, it's like all the same principles, right? The way you set up a room in a hotel ballroom, for an event, the way you design the interactions that are going to happen, the way that you, make that accessible for different types of people, the same principles should apply if you have a physical environment, right? That you're going to, if you do decide that your employees have to come back to an office, right? It's like a lot of the same principles, right? Like, make sure that not only can they get around, just obviously have, basic function of just moving about the space, but be more intentional about how they're going to interact. I mean, that your story is a perfect example, right? Like, oh, let's just take away all the chairs and make I'm sure they were saying like, oh, let's just make a handicap table,
Right. And
right?
they put
Like,
a sign on it that said that. Yeah.
literally, like in their minds, they're just like, oh, like they're not thinking through like, oh, these people might actually want to interact with other people, And so,
Right.
yeah, it's a great, a great reminder for us that all of our physical spaces need to be designed purposefully, right? With that intent for what is happening, what we want to have happen, right? If you want more
Right.
collaboration, right? Are you designing collaboration spaces? And I think this, now this kind of applies to technology. I mean, I know everybody is having, it's like Zoom fatigue, right? It's like now,
Mhm.
we're just, a lot of people are just online all the time, but there's so many great, ways to design and facilitate interaction and do it, asynchronously, right? So it's not like
Okay. What does that word mean?
so we don't all have to, so synchronously would be we're all in a meeting at the same time, right? It's synchronous. Like it's, the time, like the time is what's synchronized, right? Like we
Okay.
all have to be together. And this is how it worked, even say like back in your office, right? When we were in an office, like, okay, there's a meeting, right? We all come together, we talk about the thing, and then we go our separate ways. Well, this is not useful for people who aren't either extroverts or super confident in just coming up with things on the fly, if that's if that's how that meeting's being run. So
Mhm.
asynchronous is, how do you collaborate in a way, like how are you making sure that you're getting different people's ideas and opinions, like you're giving people space to think about something before they respond, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be and you could have a meeting where everybody comes together either in person or on Zoom or whatever, but allowing for some asynchronous collaboration to be built in as well, where people can access the information, they're commenting like on a Google Doc, whatever, right? There's a million tools out there
Right.
that help you do this kind of stuff, but the point is, let it be over a space of time where people are working and thinking and collaborating and asking, and granted, I think now, one of the hot jobs is, people who are facilitators. I think that's, going to be one good thing that comes out of this. Is somebody who, was already a good facilitator in a physical space. And
Mhm.
I've been involved in some of these groups where these folks are trying to, quickly figure out how they can do that online. And so, we just had a future of work conference last Saturday we found a technology called Kiko Chat. It's QIQO chat, where you can actually do an open space format online, which is, I mean, I thought that was the only thing left that, like would have to be in person. And we've proven that you can be online and still have that peer-to-peer learning engagement, that learning style. So yeah, I think
Okay.
there's
So for people who don't understand what that means, can you talk about what open space,
oh yeah,
yeah.
thank you. I should define that as well. So an open, so there's a lot of different, like unconference, open space. Adrian Seeger, you should look him up as well. Like he's definitely the one that's written multiple books on this topic, and so he's definitely the expert. I just have soaked in as much of his knowledge as I can. He's definitely one of my mentors, but so he can tell you what all the different things are called. But essentially, it just comes down to it's that peer-to-peer learning, right, is the gist of it. It's not having somebody on a stage, or in this case somebody on a screen, giving you a PowerPoint presentation, right?
Mhm.
That's like one to many, where is what you'd call that style of learning, right? It's really, how do you get people into groups where somebody suggests a topic, like, hey, I want to talk about this topic. I may not have all the answers, right? I may know some stuff, but I just want to
Mhm.
convene a small group for us to get together and like talk about this thing, right? So it just organically gets formed at the beginning of the event. What are all the topics that people want to talk about? So there's no set agenda. There are no set like speakers in advance, right? You get together, you kind of crowdsource what's going to be covered. People, volunteer to lead a conversation. You still need strong facilitators, right? Even if it's online, you needed a strong facilitator to run that kind of event before, somebody like Adrian,
Mhm.
but you also need a strong, facilitator to do it online as well. Nothing's changed there. But yeah, then you get, people into these small groups. There's a way for them to collaborate, share notes, share
Mhm.
ideas, thoughts, opinions, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just, so really, I think, where we were kind of heading with that is,
Right.
synchronous versus asynchronous as far as remote, remote or any kind of work, right? Collaboration. Those terms are more common in education, right? Like they talk about that in learning, like does everybody have to be in the class at the same time, or is it like they can, read the materials and watch the videos like on their own time, right? Like that's really the area where those terms are used more. And so really facilitating the design of your space, the design, designing with intention, how your team collaborates. These are just, a few things to think about.
Well, and I think just bringing back to diversity and inclusion, which was the first question that I asked, was that learning, everybody's diverse and in how they learn. Some people are really struggling with this online learning because they want that in person. They need that. It's like that teacher who the girl couldn't get her math questions right, and she texted her teacher, and he actually lived across the street, but ran across the street with his whiteboard and sat there for however long and walked her through, while they talked through the glass door.
I love it.
And so she just couldn't get it on her own. And so I think being inclusive in how we do our meetings and how we do our provide learning for people, I think is really, really important in what we're thinking. And that actually, when we're talking about online, you have to think about those who work for you that are visually impaired or hearing impaired, and do we have, closed captioning, things like that. So I think that's really cool. And diversity and inclusion is a huge opportunity for companies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So the next question that I have, I love it for the fact of how I talk about food and beverage, but in authenticity. So it seems that authenticity is what we kind of are really craving. And I want authenticity in my food and what I'm eating, and I want to know where it comes from. How can organizations gain more trust and loyalty by being authentic? And can they do that?
Well, that's the question of the day, right? It is not so much can they, but again, it goes back to, will they? It's easy, you've been told for so long, right, by PR experts that it's all about damage control. It's about having this perfect image, right? Well, that is not where people are at anymore, right? We want to see, and so there was, there's been you see more of these examples, right? CEOs get it, like they're starting to get it. Something about, their company screws up in some way, right? Now you're starting to see, and I think, and this is the thing, as consumers, we are much savvier about, like, we're just tired of being sold to, right? Like, this is why, nobody trusts advertising, right? Like, we want something that feels real. We want something that we know you're telling the truth, right? So if you're going to admit that, you screwed up and this is what we're doing to make it better, people can tell if you're being truthful, if you're being authentic, when you do that, right? But it's, so bless you if if you've worked in PR for 20 years, and I know you're going to want to fight me on this about how, no, if something goes wrong, let's do our best to just sweep it under the rug. And it's all about it's all about the optics, right? Like that word just gets under my skin like you would not believe. And I was doing some writing the other day. I realized maybe why that is, but I won't go into that. I won't go into that today. But yeah, again, just my preference always is just for people to be real, and it's something that I'm working on myself, right? It's as simple as me doing videos on YouTube without makeup on, right? Like, how can I connect with you? Like, how can I just be more real, right? How can I be more raw? Like, talking about things, talking about the emotional struggles that I have gone through, the last few years, right? Like, talking about that, because and now it's been weird for me because it's like, I've been, going through this emotional roller coaster for, a year, like maybe several years. And now I feel like everybody's joined my party, right? It's like, oh, come on board. Let me tell you about, sadness and anger and all these things, right? So having, again, back to, having leadership that knows themselves, like can recognize, feelings in themselves. They can then extend that to their employees. Trusting, I mean, it starts with trusting your employees, right? So trusting them to do their jobs, trusting, if you're lucky enough to have an employee that has a strong personal brand and they have something to say about anything. I mean, ideally it's something that's like, somewhat related to what the company's mission is. But even if they don't, right, allowing them to, still have that platform, and people see that, right, and they will connect that goodwill back to your, like, if they know, whether it's explicit or implicit, right, they will know, if that company is connected, or that employee is connected to your company, they will trust you more, right, because they see somebody who's being authentic. They see that you're trusting your employees to be authentic, and then that in turn creates that loyalty. So you create more loyal employees by letting them be themselves, right, like by just creating that culture of authenticity. And then, I mean, I truly believe it extends to customers as well, right? Like your customers will then trust you and be more loyal to you if they feel like you're being authentic. And and that can be, again, that can be good or bad, right? Just be real, right? Don't just don't try to pretend like you're a company made of people, right? And we're all flawed, right? Like people, we make mistakes, right? Like, it's messy, right? And so just be real about that and not hide behind a pretty logo and just be like, nothing to see here, right? Like, we're all perfect.
Well, and it's funny, there's two commercials that popped into my head that to me are authentic in kind of crazy ways, but Toyota, they've always got that woman with the long black hair and she's in the Toyota dealership and she's telling you, but like a commercial I saw the other day, she's standing in her living room in front of a white wall, giving her the commercial and saying, hey, we're here
I would
with
do that.
you.
That's funny. Yeah.
And I mean, so they're bringing, without all of her makeup on, and she's got her red shirt on for Toyota or whatever, but, and then there's I think it's another I think it's an insurance company, but they have a bunch of different people talking and they're like, and we can still make a commercial. And all of these employees from their company have piped in onto Zoom and recorded their own thing about their message and says, and it still allows us to create a commercial. And unfortunately, I don't remember the brand. So sorry, whoever company you are, but I think that, and I think people are learning more and more about the authenticity of people because we're live broadcasting from our bedrooms and our base. I mean, Roger Goodall, right? Is live broadcasting tonight for the NFL draft, and he's going to be in his basement. And who knows if he has a green screen up or whatever, but it's more authentic.
I do love that. But again, see, I've totally bought into this, this authenticity. There was another book I read more recently called Ditch the Act.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that gets to the point of like, right? Like, it's just really, training you more on how to create an authentic personal brand. I mean, I was already bought in right before I read that book. I was like, yeah. I mean, I've been, talking about personal branding for a decade. It's like, that was my jam 10 years ago when social media was a new thing. Right. And so I love, the fact that we are in each other's homes and like, just, showing more of who you are. But I will acknowledge for some people that is hard. Like they like more of that separation, between their work and their home. And so whatever I can do to just, help them bridge that gap, right? Build that bridge, whatever, like whatever cliche you want to use.
All right, going back to the EQ, and I think like the first two questions that I asked, I have to go back and look at my notes. Yeah, question number 1 and question number 2, but some of the words from that were adaptability and compassion and the last one, authenticity. So we've been talking about all of those things. How, with what you're doing after having gone and figured out who you are and what you want to do with your life, how are you helping businesses build these capabilities?
Yeah. So, I mean, really what I had identified was, I want to, help build companies that and I know that the wording seems weird to some people. And so I'm welcome, I'm open to suggestions, but what I came up with was, helping companies, helping create companies that humans want to work for and buy from. For me, it's just, around the thing I'm passionate about is just making work a better experience for people. I mean, I'm really, really honing in more on the employee side, even though I have more experience on the customer side, in sales and marketing and, customer, I mean, really all the way back to my, my start in hospitality, as a, convention services manager. Like I've always, I have so much experience in these customer facing roles, and then also in sales and marketing, customer success, whatever you want to call it, right? It's a million different things. So I have a lot of experience in that. And that is, when I rebranded my business from Building Block Social Media, which is what I started, 10 years ago, rebranded that to EGCX Group, which, by the way, CX stands for customer experience, right? Like the idea is, having a high level role or department that is treating your customers like they're humans and designing everything you do around them, not like how are they going to fit in, with you. So the same thing. So this is my slight pivot, that I've been, kind of toying with is more on the employee side, right? So how do you help employees, how do you designing everything about the employee experience around the fact that they are human, and, you need to learn, compassion. And just quickly, compassion, different than empathy. Like if you're empathetic, you're really taking on somebody's pain, right? Like you're feeling it with them, right? Whereas, and it affects you, like it affects you emotionally, right? Whereas compassion is kind of feeling it, like understanding it, but being able to create a little bit of a barrier for yourself so that you're not like in it with them, right? Like so you can be, understanding of what they're going through, like certainly the same level of understanding and empathy on that level, but it's not, because you can't take everybody's, all of everybody's problems, right? Then we would all be a mess, or like, and not get anything done, right? So thanks for reminding me about compassion as well as being part of this. So that's, that's been my journey. And my breaking news, just as of this week, is my exciting new announcement is I have purchased a company called Event Integrity. And this was a company that my friend Crystal Husky built. And I was, I've been so in awe of her since I was first introduced to her. And hearing her story and hearing about, what she saw as a need in the events industry to, create more of that. And it was about transparency, right? It's about authenticity and transparency in, purchasing the different, services and working with vendors and that kind of thing. And I just thought it was amazing. And so, I've been, kind of a passive advisor to her over the past couple years, helping her when I can. And she has, recently moved on to, something else, and the opportunity it just felt like the right time, with everything that's going on, for me to take that company over and, and see what I can do with it. So I think, really, I believe my vision for the future, there was a definition of sustainability I came across 10 years ago when I was, first really getting into the sustainability movement within the events industry. And that definition of sustainability is the 3 Ps. It's people, planet, and profit. And honestly, I mean, it's stuck with me all this time, right? It's, you need that focus. Again, customer experience, employee experience, like that focus. And it really goes to your vendors as well, treating your vendors like they're humans as well, because they are, right? Like, so the people you're doing business with in whatever direction, right? Treating them all like humans and, bringing that, compassion, authenticity to those relationships as well. So that people side of it is a thing that, I'm personally most fired up about. But the planet, part of it, just like, I think a lot of people are getting real about, obviously climate change, like that's a whole, again, that's like a whole separate topic, right? We're not going to get into today, but that change is coming, right? Like whether or not, you want to be part of it, but that's going to be one of those things where, again, your customers, your employees, they want to work for companies, they want to buy for companies that are doing the right thing. I think that we've gotten away with not doing it. quite frankly, right? We've gotten away with, like, again, because things are going well, like, oh, it's like, don't like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think we've gotten
Right.
away with a lot. And I think that people our age and younger, and, and some older folks are not going to be having it anymore. They're going to demand that companies, events, whatever it is, like, that they are, doing whatever they can, to limit their carbon footprint, right?
Right.
So, and then the profit side of it, like, obviously, right? So equally, to focus on people, focus on the planet, you still have to make money, right? You still have to be profitable. So all
Right.
three of these, placed in equal importance, within the values and the culture of your company. I think that's my vision of the future, and I want to take. And I want to figure out a way of taking event integrity, to that place, maybe where I'm helping connect those companies that share those values.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so stay tuned.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to be part of that and to stay tuned, how do they do that?
Yeah, so there will be a link on my site below, where you can, jump on the mailing list and get updated, as it unfolds. And I really do want to make this, again, a collaborative. I want this to be a collaborative thing, within, likely within the events industry. So
Yeah.
I would love anybody's help. My website, my personal website is egcxgroup.com, and on there I also have a link to just schedule a meeting with me. So if you want to schedule 30 minutes with me just to chat, I mean, I would love to just hear your ideas and chat with you, one-on-one, about what you think the state of the events industry is in, and how we can make some huge pivots and be adaptable as an industry, right? Like, yes, we're all doing maybe our little mini pivots, but, like, I think there's an opportunity for some big changes, and for us to do things, a lot better for the future sustainability of our industry, right? So if you're interested in talking to me one-on-one, or just hearing my updates, please reach out about that.
Awesome. And we probably should have said throughout this entire thing that we're live tweeting, with each one of these conversations. So if you have any questions, you can tweet Elizabeth for the rest of the day. Actually, she'll be around. We both will. So you can tweet us and ask questions about her interview that we just did, and then anybody else coming up. Who do we have coming up next, Elizabeth? I know you interviewed him. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so Neil Padwarden is the owner of a company called Cambio, and he and I are going to dig really into more of the diversity piece and how it applies to hiring, right? Like, what are the technology? I mean, he's got a specific technology, but we talk about hiring technologies, data-driven narratives, a lot of good stuff. So definitely come back for that one at the top of the next hour. Yeah. And we've got the rest of today, and awesome sessions tomorrow as well, on just a number of amazing topics from our friends.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I'm so excited to be doing this summit with you, which is Leadership and Workplace Culture Summit. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Make sure evolving leadership the Evolving Leadership and Workplace Culture Summit. I am running this thing. I should know the name of it. So this is Tracy Stuckrath, and this is Elizabeth Glau, and we're so happy that you're here. And Elizabeth, I'm so happy for you, and I look so forward to hearing and seeing what you're going to do with event integrity. So that's it for the day, or not for the day, for this hour.
Right,
so thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.